online and in person for EUA, and the first at Scotland House. And because we are virtual, I will say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Commissioner Gabriel, and friends of innovation, and friends of universities across Europe, can I formally welcome you on behalf of EUA. We're here to celebrate the launch of EUA's Innovation Survey on how universities support innovation across Europe. And we're looking forward to hearing your views in the course of the afternoon on what we have found. And we hope they're diverse, because diversity is the strength of Europe. Now, EUA has supported university innovation and universities' roles in innovation for at least a decade. In 2013, we joined forces with the Commission's Joint Research Centre to investigate the contribution that universities make to regional innovation. And initially, we had an expert group compiling success stories of university innovation in a regional context, and we published recommendations back then about how universities could do better, smart specialization strategies. So we were inspired by accumulating evidence and launched an in-depth study, pan-European, back in 2017. And our main goal at that point was to map the interactions between universities and companies, civic and public sector institutions within our ecosystems. And that study identified that the context was changing for universities, owing to the increasing complexity of innovation processes and acceleration of the innovation cycle. So the changing context has itself changed the role of universities in innovation systems, and now our institutions have become the central actors in regional processes. The 2017 study showed that companies and policymakers see universities as being ideally suited to connect the dots, because we are impartial. We're driven by curiosity and long-term perspectives rather than by commercial interests and short-term goals. But to connect the dots effectively, universities have to enhance our innovation capacity so that we can better contribute to the ecosystems. And that work from 2017 contributed to the genesis of EUA's vision for our future institutions, Universities Without Walls, which was published earlier this year. Within it, we outlined, among many other things, the future of university innovation in Europe. Now, the challenges that we are facing in Europe and the world are daunting, and many are highlighted this week in Glasgow at COP26, because the climate crisis in particular and sustainability more broadly are especially urgent. And they've already led many universities to put our missions in education and research and innovation and in culture primarily into the service of achieving the UN sustainability goals. Technological university developments, including digital transition, for example, are changing lives, and they're disrupting labour markets. And universities generate the knowledge that create these new technologies for social innovation. But universities also ensure that the impact of new technologies are researched and evaluated, and that our graduates are equipped for labour markets that are changing due to digitalization, to new technologies, and to artificial intelligence. Inevitably, stronger adherence to SDG principles and adaptation to ever-evolving technology will change dramatically the way that universities and our partners will work. And finally, of course, the COVID pandemic has accelerated change. It's led to a rapid expansion in digital provision. It has augmented support for research and for innovation to solve major societal challenges. And these pandemic-driven changes are likely to be long-lasting. In particular, The pandemic drove greater recognition of the importance of basic research, most evident in the development of vaccines, but also the recognition of the importance of quick societal responses to major challenges. And both of these will have positive impact on our innovation ecosystems long term. So 2021 seemed to be an auspicious time to re-examine the capacity of Europe's universities in supporting societal innovation. So accordingly, EUA, through its Innovation Ecosystems Expert Group, has now conducted a sector-wide survey to build an up-to-date picture of innovation at Europe's universities. And we received inputs from 166 institutions across 28 countries. And from the evidence, we've gone on to develop recommendations for universities, for policymakers, and for funding agencies on how to further enable our institutions to better support innovation. The first important lesson from the study is that innovation has become an important priority for universities. The vast majority of institutions now have a formal strategy committed to innovation. And secondly, universities are strongly committed to achieving transition to a sustainable and digitally connected society. And moreover, they're confident that Europe's research and innovation capabilities will allow it to achieve a sustainable transition and a leadership position in the digital transition in the future. But to fulfill the EU's commitment to the green and digital transitions, the respondents also indicate that we need to further strengthen regional innovation ecosystems by interconnecting them into one vibrant and inclusive pan-European ecosystem. And universities are key actors. We contribute to innovation in many ways by developing new solutions to societal challenges, by fostering multidisciplinarity, by developing, attracting, and retaining human talent, by stimulating entrepreneurial mindsets, and by facilitating uptake of new technologies, in cooperation, of course, with business and the public sector, as well as through startups and spin-outs. But our contributions go far beyond marketable products, because we innovate for sustainability across the whole of society, for nature conservation, and even to reduce the environmental impact of existing infrastructures. To fully capitalize on our institutional contributions, capacity enhancement will be key, and there are three principal factors that will help. Firstly, people, sufficient in number to fulfill our missions and incentivized to engage in innovation. Secondly, not surprisingly, investment to support especially long-term oriented research, curiosity-driven research, because these are fundamental ways to improve innovation capacity of both universities and our ecosystems in which they're situated. And thirdly, space, where researchers and students from different disciplines and all the other actors can engage in a co-creation process. But beyond the specific needs around innovation, it is also crucial to support universities in fulfilling our missions holistically. Because the survey shows that university contributions to innovation, particularly in the sustainable and digital transitions, rely greatly on integrated research and education missions. Based on the survey, we are presenting evidence-based recommendations for university leaders, for policymakers, for funding agencies on what is needed to enhance our capacity for regional leadership in innovation. And we have invited Commissioner Gabriel and you, our key stakeholders, to discuss the proposals and to reflect on how they can contribute, particularly to the upcoming innovation agenda for Europe, which is being developed by the Commission. There are 16 of these recommendations, and I will just highlight 4 in the remaining minutes. Firstly, the survey shows that universities currently incentivize staff innovation activities mostly through commercialization processes and through setting up companies. But it seems that there is still a lot of room for improvement when it comes to building motivation and individual capacity to innovate. So policymakers could help address this, supporting universities in reforming our academic career assessment processes with the aim to recognize a much wider range of academic staff contributions, including innovation activities. And in addition, policymakers could encourage universities to consider staff innovation in a broader sense, including its economic, social, cultural, ethical, and environmental impacts. Secondly, the survey shows that universities collaborate to a higher extent with public sector institutions, other universities, and research organizations, but to a lesser extent with industry. So policymakers could support universities in interacting with companies and other actors in the ecosystem, and support especially universities with lower innovation capacity through reduction in regulatory burden, through supporting skills development, through networking opportunities, funding, incentives, and advice in many different ways. Thirdly, the survey indicates that university innovation for the green transition takes many forms, but technological innovation is still far ahead of social innovation. And here, policymakers could support collaboration between universities, civil society, and local institutions to understand the specific societal needs to which innovation should respond. And this should generate a more holistic approach to the sustainable green transition, so that innovation contributes equally to climate change mitigation and adaptation. Fourthly, universities are confident that Europe will attain leadership in digital transition, but while they directly contribute to this pursuit as innovators, universities also share concerns over the impact of digital innovation upon society, but also on themselves. And here policymakers could develop digital policies that acknowledge universities' concerns over the environmental, ethical, and social aspects of the digital transition. And addressing these and the wider impact on student and staff well-being is essential to achieving effective buy-in of universities and their communities in the digital agenda. So these are some of the policy recommendations. And in a little while, Stefan Bergmans, who's the EUA Director for Research and Innovation, he will outline the rest of the survey findings and the recommendations. And he will then be followed by a panel of experts chaired by Peter Bolivar, who chairs our expert group on innovation ecosystems. But first, I would like to invite our Commissioner for Innovation, Research, Culture, Education and Youth, Ms. Mariya Gabriel, whom you all know, to join me in conversation about what we're proposing. So, thank you while I transition.
Thank you very much, dear President Murphy, ladies and gentlemen, friends of universities, dear friends of innovation. First of all, allow me to start by warmly thanking the European University Association for the invitation to this event. It is a great pleasure, an honor for me to be here together with you to discuss the role of universities as a key component of the European innovation ecosystem. Indeed, it is absolutely crucial that higher education institutions are fully part of the innovation ecosystems across Europe. You are personifying the full knowledge triangle as education, research, and innovation are part of your activities. And I very much welcome the findings of your survey on innovation and European universities that includes the ideas, you said it, dear President, from 166 European universities from 28 European countries. Yes, actually we are working to create this pan-European innovation ecosystem, and I'm looking at you. You will participate in the discussion and you will share more details. But the outcomes of this survey will ensure that universities are fully on board in this endeavor. It is indeed important that universities become engines of regional innovation, of European leadership. And as the recovery offers the opportunity to invest in the future, it is now that we have collectively to build an environment in Europe in which innovation can thrive without leaving anyone behind. And it is encouraging to see that 53% of the respondents to your survey considered that their university pays high strategic attention to innovation, and that 78% of the surveyed universities are improving staff competence, student competence to innovate. But we need to go further. And in the context of the new wave of innovation, it is promising to see that 65% of the respondents collaborate with startups in a large or moderate extent. We need to continue moving in this new paradigm of innovation. And this new paradigm of innovation brings new challenges because the nature of innovation is changing and the global technological competition is intensifying. Together with stakeholders such as the Unicorns Group, Women in Venture Capital, or ecosystems leaders, we identified the main hurdles hampering Europe to become a leader in innovation. And for example, a lack of connections among local innovation ecosystems across Europe, or a business culture that is more risk-averse and less conducive to innovation. To face these issues, we need higher education institutions to be key actors of change, to promote and lead innovation, to be part of the solutions for the future of Europe, and to create together with us this pan-European innovation ecosystem. This reinforced role of universities as engines for innovation will be reflected in the future innovation policy and also in the upcoming European strategy for universities. That's one of my demands today. Always look at those two documents at the same time in order this time really to not to talk only about synergies, but to transform this word into something operational, tangible, and beneficial for our universities and our innovators. So our vision is that the higher education institutions with this European strategy for universities will be interconnected, innovative, open, inclusive, and digital. They will foster this sustainable and competitive development of the society that we would like to see. And of course, we always have in mind the European Universities Alliances that were launched under Erasmus+. That's an excellent test bed of cooperation between universities, and many of them already have a very strong focus on innovation. For us, it will be really important to assure a follow-up of this initiative, but to see how we can work for all the universities, because I never forget that 41 alliances, that means 283 universities, and we have 5,000 in Europe. So allow me to turn now into maybe one concrete example of a university that I visited and where we can see that it's possible to work for this pan-European innovation ecosystem. That was the University of Salamanca in Spain. When I was there in September, I visited one of the largest startup festivals organized in Europe, Startup Ole, and it was organized by a full professor and university students as volunteers. Right after, I visited one of the leading artificial intelligence labs, also in the tech park of the university. And from the AI lab, I walked to the library of the university, dating back from 1254, and hosting various priceless manuscripts and incunables. And this is a good example of a university that is becoming an engine for innovation, engaging professors, students, researchers, while at the same time keeping the richness of culture of the European universities. We have to preserve this. And this is not the only one example of universities becoming key actors in their local innovation ecosystem. We have the university from Finland organizing Slash, or we have Delft University, and I stay at your disposal that the members of your associations are providing me example and to give them more visibility. I'm sure that we have a lot of other examples. What we need now is to promote the best practices, to see how we can provide them the right support in the right moment, and of course count on me to give more visibility to what they are doing. And it's true that universities should not build innovation ecosystems that are isolated from the rest of the innovation ecosystem where they are located. Universities should become key actors that act as catalysts in their local and regional innovation ecosystems. But that's why we need to work together, universities, investors, founders, entrepreneurs, as well as public administrations, to build this pan-European innovation ecosystem that will allow Europe to be a leader of the new wave of innovation. That will allow students from one university to find co-founders and investors from anywhere in Europe. And I think that we have all elements for making Europe the leader in this new wave of innovation around deep tech startups. This new wave of innovation has a hardware component in 84% of the cases, and in Europe we have the leaders of industries with hardware component, from mechanical engineering to construction to energy to agriculture to automotive. And this new wave of innovation is based on intellectual property coming from science. And we are the leader in science in areas like energy or robotics or nanotechnology. On top of this, something that is, I think, close to our heart, the new wave of innovation is focused on solving the sustainable development goals. By supporting this new wave of innovation, by supporting the European universities as engine of this pan-European innovation ecosystem, we'll be solving our most pressing challenges, from climate change to health, to an economy that works for all and reduces economic differences across Europe. Of course, we have at this moment not so much instruments for this support. And during the panel, I'm sure that Anna will provide you more details, but I'm thinking here about European Institute of Innovation and Technology and our Higher Education Innovate program. Of course, that's exactly what we would like to see how we can help those institutions where there is a need to build capacity, to teach innovation, to have these entrepreneurial skills, and to develop especially concrete actions to increase their impact on the local ecosystem. The second I'm thinking too is the European Innovation Ecosystems component of Horizon Europe program. I would like here to see in a more concrete way how universities can be further supported in the next Horizon Europe program. So for me, for the moment, there is not so much concrete instruments that we have, but that's why it's our moment to see how first we can use the first important steps and tools that we have in our hands, and after to see where there is a need to intervene to build something that is scalable, something that is more coherent, something that is more impactful. So to conclude, I would like to highlight that despite the impressive progress made so far, there is still a long way to go to ensure Europe becomes the global powerhouse for the innovation. And to do so, everyone must contribute to its full potential, and your recommendations are the vivid witness of the willingness of the stakeholders to boost innovation. And that's why, together with my team, we'll look very, very carefully in all the details of your study. To go further, just allow me to invite you to participate to the European Innovation Council Summit on the 24th and 25th of November. I'm not sure that there will be a strong voice of universities, and that's why I'm using this opportunity to invite you to be with us. I will be there for you too. So I think that at this occasion we'll discuss exactly that, the future of innovation in Europe, and we'll launch the European Innovation Council Forum. And the forum will be a dedicated space to discuss and shape proposals for a future European innovation policy, to connect European innovation ecosystems and improve the existing instruments not only the existing, and we have to have some new. So I hope really to see you there. I wish you a very fruitful conference. I will follow your conclusions very closely. Thank you very much, and again, count on my support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for an extensive tour of the challenges. And by the way, thank you for mentioning Salamanca, because that's where EUA was formed.
I know.
Ah!
Young members were very active there.
You've only a few minutes, and I suppose there are lots of questions. If I just put this one to you, how does the Commission, or how might the Commission ensure synergy between this agenda and the research and education activities, which obviously enable innovation? Because for us, we have a holistic view of missions of universities. Can the Commission ensure that in its innovation strategy that synergies are features?
Absolutely, and that's our ambition since the beginning. First, maybe we always have to remind that first time one single commissioner is responsible for research, education and innovation. So that means that together with my team since the very beginning, we are looking very carefully to integrate the 3 dimensions in every single document or policy that we are elaborating. That means that when we work for a pan-European innovation ecosystem, of course, research, education are crucial elements, but that's why we need these kind of conferences, discussions, facts and arguments, because I must say that it's somehow the first time that we try to break this working silo. We try to build this coherent, holistic approach. Sometimes it's not easy, I must say, but at the same time, you have the arguments, you have the experience, and for us it's absolutely crucial to continue to exchange with you and to see always in the different parts, European strategy for universities or innovation ecosystem, how and where to better integrate the different aspects, because for me it's really important to preserve the specificity, the soul of our universities, but at the same time together with our universities to see how they can expand some of their activities, how they can innovate, and how they can contribute to other parts that are not so much traditional in our work as European Commission.
So there will be a coherence between the communications on the research area, the education area, and the innovation agenda emerges.
Absolutely, and you mentioned that one of the facts in your survey is that there is a need to have closer cooperation with industry. Remember, in our European research area, that was our 3rd priority, this joint work between academia and business, between universities and industry in order to elaborate joint technological roadmaps. So I think that since the beginning we are paying a lot of attention. Now what I would like to see is concrete actions. For sure we are here to build synergies, for sure we would like to have holistic and coherent approach, but I think that again the challenge is how we can identify together with you where are the most appropriate actions where, because you have this experience, you will make the difference, and to include you at that moment. And of course, always to talk about adequate support, because we know that we have very good intentions, excellent ambitions, but always it's very important to see how we can join efforts in order to ensure this adequate support in the right moment.
You've been to Salamanca and you've been to Slush, I guess, and you have seen the roles that universities play, and you've seen the survey. When you were dreaming at night the agenda for the future, are there any irritations that you've personally had leaving the university campuses and saying, why haven't they thought of, or why can't they do? Are there gaps that you see in our thinking about our role in innovation?
Well, in that case, I would like to see our universities working more closely with their regions. and our regions more respectful to the work of our universities, helping them to have people with the right competencies, with the right skills, and joining forces to attract investment and to create this ecosystem where we can create jobs and where we can help our citizens to thrive.
Your diary has just spoken to me, Commissioner. Can I just simply say thank you very much for your generosity in time in coming to us.
Thank you very much.
The inspiring message. And we wish you the very best of luck with the innovation agenda, and we're here to help.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now it is my pleasure to invite Stefan Berghmans, who is the Director of Research and Innovation at EUA, to tell us more about the survey and tell us more about what he's recommending to the sector.
What I'm recommending, what EUA is
we
recommending.
Personalize all of these things, Stefan.
Thank you very much, Michael. Wonderful. Perfect. Thank you. Great. What a crowd. Yesterday I was excited just by the rehearsal. Now I've got people in front of me. It's amazing, wonderful. So good to see you all, and thank you so much for coming. As Michael just said, indeed, I'll be talking about the results, but I just want to make clear, I'll be talking about a selection of the results of the EUA survey on universities and innovation. And that's because, to be very honest, in the next 20-25 minutes, I just don't have the time to present everything. Not just that. Yes, you can go and find, with a QR code, my presentation there, where you will see the selected questions. But in early 2022, we will come back to you with an in-depth report that will be contextualized also with success stories, actually, from the survey. So that's important. It's a selection. It's not everything. The rest is coming very soon. Before I start with the survey, I want to highlight that we might all agree today that indeed innovation is much more a focus of universities than it has been in the past decades. And I think that what we're missing, though, is a body of evidence to show us what is the picture in Europe of what universities are doing in terms of innovation. So that's why, with the EUA expert group on innovation ecosystem, we've got several members represented here and even a past member with us today, we set out to do a survey. And what we wanted to find out is what was the strategic attention that universities were paying to innovation. And then also we wanted to put that in connection with the innovation capacity that university had and see if there were any gaps that were present. The other thing we wanted to look into is, Michael told you about this previous report we did with case studies of 9 universities. We had identified that the actors in the ecosystem see universities as honest brokers. And so we wanted to investigate that too. Before I move on to the survey, I just want to highlight also that, yes, innovation, as Michael highlighted, is indeed at EUA a process of knowledge co-creation and transfer for the economy, but not only. He mentioned social, environmental, cultural innovation also as being other important elements, and they're not the only ones. You have a list here of examples of innovation taking place at universities. I don't have the time to go into it, but you'll have that to read. No need to repeat it, 166. I think it's a wonderful number for a first ever survey on innovation at universities. And you can see here the split. We can see that in Italy, for example, in Spain, we had quite a big number of responses. It's a bit unfair because really, for example, Belgium has less universities, and yet about 50% of all the universities in Belgium answered. In Iceland, for example, 75%. So just keep that in mind when you look at those results. Importantly, the profile of the institutions here. The vast majority, 70%, are actually comprehensive universities. But we also had a very good proportion of the technical universities as well as universities of applied science, and a small proportion, there's less of course, of specialist institution also. So let me now move on to the survey itself and the first section, which was about the capacity that universities have in innovation. So the first question we set out to ask was, does your institution have a strategy or a mission statement that reflects its innovation agenda? And as was highlighted by Michael, but also by the commissioner, it's overwhelmingly yes. 74% say yes, and you can see that there's an additional 23% that say no, but they're in process of developing that or updating their strategy. So clearly here we're talking about 93% that have actually or are working on a strategy for innovation. And again, that can take many different shapes and form. It could be about social innovation, through contribution with collaboration, for example, to sustainable society. It's also about research, but it's also about learning and teaching. We've seen, oh, it's going faster than I expected. But it's also about learning and teaching with student innovation and entrepreneurship. So the next thing we wanted to look into is the assessment of the overall institutional strategic attention and the link with the innovation capacity that you have at universities. And we can see that 75% said that it was very high or high attention that they were paying to innovation. Good news. A bit less optimistic universities about their innovation capacity, and you can see that we're at 60%. So there is a gap between their vision, their strategy, and how much they can actually do. Where do the gaps come from? Well, Michael told you, 3. First, not enough space for co-creation. Second, not enough investment, sustainable funding. And finally, people, staff. It's both about being able to hire the staff, but then also how to motivate the staff at universities. And that's really about the incentives, making sure that innovation is incentivized at universities. So that's what we set out also to look into, is what sort of support, in this next question we were asking, what sort of support do academic staff this time receive to enhance the institutional innovation capacity? And on top you can see that yes, there's good support for commercialization of ideas and research results, but there's also dedicated services provided to support them. Good news. Unfortunately, when you go lower down in the responses, you can see that there's less actually presence at universities of incentives, for example, awards, career development, and worst case, career assessment. Only 33% of universities who responded have that within their career assessment system. So the problem is that today university staff and the innovation they do actually are not yet well recognized in the academic career assessment system. So that's one of the messages to keep in mind. We then set out to look at the framework conditions for enhancing university innovation capacity. And as we said before, staff, that's qualified teaching, research, and administrative staff. It's about funding, sufficient sustainable funding for innovation activities. And then of course, very important is the governance, but also institutional autonomy. You need to have institutional autonomy at universities to be able to do your mission in innovation. That's a key element too. Interestingly, what we're not showing, this is an open list here with other responses, is all the regulatory framework. We're talking about, state aid rules, procurement, regulation, is actually much lower down. So that's really not considered as important in terms of framework condition. Except for IP. IP regulation is right there at 84% below what we see here. And I've kept for the end the connections to global innovation communities, and importantly, the cooperation among different actors in the innovation ecosystem. That's because we looked in next what those partnerships are actually in the area of innovation. And what you're seeing is that universities are collaborating in innovation with local, regional, national, public sector institutions. Also with other universities in their own country and with research organizations. Unfortunately, the lesson from this slide is that when it comes to the private sector, it's much lower down. And it's even worse when we look at civil society organizations. So here, what we did is a correlation analysis. And we went back to the first questions and looked at those universities that specifically said they had a high attention on innovation. And when we look at them specifically, they collaborate much more with large companies and with civil society organizations. So again, another lessons to learn here. More attention to innovation, more collaboration with the private sector, as well as civil society. Finally, we looked at the funding sources for innovation at universities. And overwhelmingly, the response is, the biggest one is national competitive funding, followed at 71% with funding from regional government as well as Erasmus+. A first surprise, because we were not expecting Erasmus Plus to be there. But when you think about it, it makes sense. What does Erasmus Plus allow you to do? Collaborate with other universities, do learning and teaching. And we see, and we will see, that those are important elements to implement innovation at universities. So not so much of a surprise. More of a surprise is around the framework program and the different instruments. EIT, EIC are quite low, actually. So maybe they're not well known enough still at universities. Understandable for EIC, certainly, and we can expect that in the coming years it will be better known. As Commissioner Gabriel mentioned, these two are important elements for the innovation agenda in Europe. And then, of course, different roles you see with the other ones right here. That was for the innovation capacity. Let me move on now to the twin transition. We know how important the twin transition is for Europe, for the future of Europe, even for the world, when you think about the green transition. So we specifically looked into the sustainable and the digital transition also in our survey. So starting with the sustainable transition, first we looked at the university contributions to innovation for a sustainable transition. And what we see is that the way they contribute is through actually developing new technologies through university research activity. So that's research. The next is actually about staff, people, and students, people. So back to people. It's about improving student and staff understanding of sustainability, but also competence to innovate. But in this list of response, I'll make the important point that you see the empty box there. That's because actually this is the bottom. There's other responses there, and that's the top 5. But we see stark contrast. Because at the top, research activity, as I mentioned, but at the bottom, changing consumer behaviors in society. So maybe there's a lesson to learn there for universities, is that they need to ensure balance between the technology and the social innovation. So that's one thing to remember. The other stark contrast is 70% answered that when it comes to existing infrastructure, they do reduction in the environmental impact of those infrastructures. But at 50% only, they talk about improving the resilience of the existing infrastructure. And here we're talking about probably universities needing to be more holistic in their approach, because they need to support climate change mitigation and also adaptation. We then set out to look at university research and education activities in delivering innovation for a sustainable transition. And here, what we're seeing is that on top, we're seeing improving the transfer of research results to innovation, so research again, followed again with students that you see here, and down there with entrepreneurial training and improving students' awareness of innovation for sustainability. This is again about researchers, so research, students, learning and teaching, research present there. In an interesting third place, you've got interdisciplinarity. So very nice to see it there. The creation of interdisciplinary institutes actually at universities. The somewhat more sad part of this question is what we see here about citizen science. It's only down at 46% when we take very important that we see the presence of citizen science. So again, one of the lessons, the take-home message from this question is that there needs to be more support for widespread use of citizen science when it comes to innovation, specifically in the case of sustainable transition. We also set out to look at the indicators that universities use to measure their success when it comes to innovation in the sustainable transition. So you've got the list here, and I was honestly expecting to see patents at the top. Well, that's not what we see. What we see at the top are partnerships, number of partnerships for sustainability-related activities. Okay? Second, learning and teaching, number of study programs addressing sustainability in the curriculum. And also the number of graduates that you see there happening also. So interesting, again, you've got learning and teaching, so back to people and how that is important. Again, as I said, number of patent application is much lower. What's also much lower and somewhat disappointing is the nurturing of the startup sector for sustainable tech and not tech solution. So really, it raises a question. If it's not with the private sector that the partnerships that they're using as indicators are taking place, what sort of partnerships are we talking about? So we ran again a correlation analysis to find out which were those types of partnerships. And unfortunately, we see that it's mostly with other universities, research organization. It's also with civil society or organization, as well as the national public sector institutions. So something to do there, as was said to the commissioner also by you, Michael, about more links with the private sector, especially in this case, sustainable transition. Let's move on to the digital transition, where here we first asked something about the challenges that universities are facing when it comes to innovation in the digital transition. And what you're seeing here, actually in the top 4, is, not surprisingly, as was mentioned before, funding. So funding in this case for technology adoption upgrades. It's about staff. It's staff both hiring of digitally skilled staff, but also uptake of digital skills among current staff. And then finally, it's about cyber security for the top 4 responses that you see there. And let's face it, this is important because while we hear a lot of talks about technology leadership at European level, you will not be able to achieve this unless you have capacity building first. This is all about capacity building at universities. So let's keep that in mind. The positive message, I think, that you see here in those results is what we see at the bottom. So it is not anymore so much a challenge for universities to find digital partners in the ecosystem. And it's not either a problem to cooperate with them. So very good news to see also from these results. We also set out to look for indicators in the success, how universities measure actually their success in the area of digital transition for innovation. And once again, you see that patents are much lower down, but the numbers of partnerships is again on top, with the number of study programs addressing digital innovation in the curriculum. We also see in this case that nurturing the startup sector for digital solutions is actually, even though the proportion is not higher, it's actually higher in its position. So it seems that in this area, there might be more collaboration with the private sector. We ran again a correlation analysis, and indeed in this case, universities do, for the digital transition when it comes to innovation, collaborate much more with SMEs. It was even the only significant correlation we could find in this case. So interesting result also that we see here. Finally, we asked a question about the enablers for innovation in the digital transition at universities. And I'm sorry to hit the nail so many times, but that's the reality of the survey, and that's why it's so important. It's about people. It's first about qualified staff. It's again sufficient and sustainable funding. Nice third place again here that you see with the interdisciplinarity. What's interesting in this one though is that all the more digitally oriented, more the technically oriented ones, such as access to more big data, for example, AI and big data governance, or computing capacities, are actually less seen as major enablers compared to the ones we've heard before about staff, funding, or in this case, interdisciplinarity. So those are the elements from this. So I'm done with the survey for now, but before I leave you, of course, I want to go back to the recommendations. I want to stress again what Michael said. These are recommendations not just for policymakers at national and European level, but also for funding agencies and for universities. So we do have 2 columns specifically for that. I want to insist. Then we also have recommendations for innovation capacity, and in my next slide you'll see for sustainable transition as well as for the digital transition. So I don't have the time to go through all the recommendations. Of course, I just want to highlight again, because it was mentioned many times, the support universities in interacting with companies and other actors in the innovation ecosystem. I think Michael was very clear in mentioning that, lowering the regulation burden, for example, allowing more opportunities for networks, giving incentives, providing advice, for example, skills development are key elements to allow this to happen at universities. And then looking at universities themselves, actually, we're talking about, for example, in this case, boosting the preparation of next generation of digital innovators. So this is really about entrepreneurship, but it goes beyond. It's really about broad skills. It needs to be a range of transversal skills that include, for example, interdisciplinarity. Oops, moving to, oh sorry, I had moved already. So that's interesting. I didn't even notice I was looking at you. The only one I would highlight then to finish is probably this one, which was also mentioned before in the slides and by Michael. It's about capacity building. I think it's quite important to understand that there needs to be a support for the adoption, but also the upgrading of technologies. And it's back also at staff. Being able to hire skilled staff is a key element for the success here. And then finally, of course, the staff that is at universities, we've heard in the results of the survey that it's about the uptake of digital skills when it comes to staff. So with that, I will stop. I will thank you very much for your attention. Look forward for the full report when it comes out in early 22. And in the meantime, you have the QR code to go and find the presentation. And I'll be happy to take a few questions before we move on then. Before we move on to this wonderful panel. Questions? Comments? It's been 2 years. People are not used to this anymore. And if you're worried, we've got Lenka with wipes so that she will wipe off the microphone if you take it in your hand. So don't worry about this. Okay? No comments? Nothing? No question? In that case, well, and I guess we can, yes? Sorry, Michael, I had not seen you.
I hate silences at the end of presentations. Stefan, that was very enjoyable. I have a question for you. On the measures of success slide, what struck me about it are that most of the elements listed are really inputs rather than outputs or impact of innovation efforts. Is work being done to try to come up with valid, measurable, real impacts on regional society arising from university engagement? I'm talking about being able to see impacts on employment, new types of jobs in a region, social gain. Has some thinking in that space?
Well, that's a very good question. I think that this morning, we had a meeting of the expert group, and we're thinking about the future agenda, and that's a question I will put to them, and maybe, Peter, you can talk about that during the panel, because I think that, at least from my side, what I would answer is, you're only as good as the data you have. So maybe today we're missing key data to be able to go beyond actually the input and see and look at the output. So maybe that's one thing that we need to think about for the future, is if we want to have other indicators, that will be a way to look. And I see that Peter is raising his hand, so he certainly wants to react to this.
So thank you for the question. We're always very careful with measuring output parameters because innovation is a strange beast. Yeah? If we're honest, innovation starts where the work of universities finish, when we start making products, commercial transition, etc. And so it's a joint effort, yeah? And so that's why we, on purpose, are very careful with output parameters, because it's a different thing making innovation from a university in Munich area, yeah, with BMW and many other companies in your surrounding, than making it in a region where the only true and complete innovator is the academic institution. Yeah? And I don't want to geographically localize that, but I think that, you know, it's a different story. Yeah? And so I think we have to be very careful with output parameters. Output parameters are always a product of university multiplied by the local environment, industry engagement, business angels, financials, and etc. And so we cannot uniquely attribute it to the universities. Yeah? And that's something to bear in mind. It doesn't mean that I want to chicken out of output parameters, but we have to be careful in how to evaluate them. And that's something which we need to work in the future, perhaps jointly with industry. Yeah? It's something which it's never a product of us alone.
So we've got 5 more minutes for question. I've got Toril right there, and then I've got Pirita in the back.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for a very, very interesting presentation. And I'm Toril Hernes from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. I'm also part of the expert group, so we discussed the results. But I would very much like you to comment on the start of your presentation, where you actually comment that so many of the university actually have a strategy on innovation as compared to, for example, 10 years ago or so. So there is a kind of change and development in the sector that, and based on your experience, could you say something about a kind of movement within the sector when it comes to contribution of innovation?
Well, again, you are more of an expert than I am. You're from the expert group, so I'm sure you've got a good answer to that. But I think that from my short personal experience, it's been quite amazing to see indeed the move. And there probably are many reasons for that, some of which are policy driven, funding driven. You see indeed that governments are indeed, and we're seeing that right now with the European Commission also, pushing much more towards innovation. What we have to be careful, though, when we see that happening, is, as we're saying, and I didn't stress it maybe enough among the recommendations, is that we cannot forget that even if there's a bigger push on innovation, what's feeding innovation is the long-term basic research, the fundamental research. So when we call for funding, I think Michael said it very clearly, it's not just for innovation, but it's also for the research and innovation. The basic research is one of the fundamental engine that will feed in the innovation there. So not sure I responded as an expert, but Pirita, and then we'll take a question probably from Frederick, but we'll have to shortly move to the panel. I don't want to take away time from the panel. That's going to be quite exciting. Pirita, introduce yourself and...
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Pirita Lindholm, Director of ERIN, the European Regions Research and Innovation Network. This was really an excellent presentation, Stefan. I really enjoyed it. Just going back a little bit to the last point that Commissioner Gabriel made, I was wondering, because you have put the recommendations to European national policymakers, it would be interesting to continue the discussions and see what are also the recommendations to the regional policymakers. So I think this is something that I would like to continue discussing with you and your expert group, and maybe we can then find a way also to continue the discussions in the ERIN context together. So more an invitation to go forward with these recommendations further and see how we can kind of put them in place. Thanks.
And to be very honest with you, I wish we could, with the results, break it. So we've now looked at the results in an aggregated manner. There are some countries where we could go and look at a country. I think one suggestion from DG Regio has been to look at regional, but not in your sense. We're talking about EU 13, for example, and seeing if we see differences. We will probably not be able to go to the nuts level, but that's certainly something we would be more than happy to speak about with you, especially now that we go into in-depth analysis. I think we don't have the means with this sort of data to go, but I think that it will be interesting indeed to look at the regional perspective, because the recommendations, you are absolutely right, are also about the regional. And when we talk about regional, it's all the actors in the ecosystem, not just the universities or the policymakers.
Hi, my name is Stefan Gies from AEC, the Association of European Higher Music Education Institutions, but I have a very general question, not related to music. First, thank you very much for this presentation with this very valuable findings. My question, you explicitly mentioned the impact or the significance of Erasmus Plus. I was a little bit surprised because I would rather have expected that it's talk about Horizon, because if I research innovation, I would not first of all think about Erasmus, which is first of all about education. So could you say some words about that?
Well, I cannot say much than what I said already. I think that to us, it was indeed a surprise too. We were not expecting that. But again, starting to look into it, and maybe we're going to take a bit more time to explore that, keep in mind that we'll be able to potentially go back to some of those who were surveyed and try to find out a bit more. We haven't had the time, I have to be very honest. But the explanation we understand right now is that what Erasmus Plus offers is actually something about learning and teaching, which is perceived very much at universities to be a means of implementing innovation, at least when it comes to entrepreneurship, but also innovation within the learning and teaching. And then the other element, as I was mentioning, is how we've seen in the results that collaboration between universities is a key element anyway in what universities are doing to do innovation. And they do that more than collaborating, unfortunately, with the private sector. But Erasmus Plus allows that sort of collaboration. And so that's how we're seeing it now. But again, it's an early stage, and I think that's something that when we redo this survey in a few years, first, I'd love to see where the other instruments sit. I expect EIC hopefully will be higher. And otherwise, see how, asking other questions to nail down maybe a bit better what it is about Erasmus Plus that they find so interesting and good for funding for the funding of innovation. Good. Pim, I'm really sorry. We're at 16. We have to move on. I really don't want to take away too much time, but more than happy to talk to you afterwards. Now we have the great privilege of having a great panel. Oh, sorry?
One more question here.
Frederick, quick.
I can make it very quick. I want to build on Michael's questions and Peter's perspective. I comply with Peter's perspective, but I think that we need to be cautious in deploying output indicators, and I agree with that. But I also see the need for universities to more clearly display our value. We will not get a greater responsibility than society sees that we deserve. So we need to get in there, I think, to find ways to display our value, our impact, and we cannot take full responsibility, that's for sure. But we need to demonstrate that we contribute, and we need to tell stories on how that happened. If we succeed in this, we will be able to attract the resources we need to be credible and strong players in the future.
Great. It was a comment, not a question. I don't need to answer. Wonderful.
Thanks.
Thanks, Frederick. So in that case, it is a privilege, I think, we have today, especially in the current conditions, to have 4 panelists joining us actually from very diverse backgrounds. We've got Annick Castiaux, who's the rector of University Namur, but also actually a member of the EUA expert group on innovation ecosystem. We've got Anna Panagopoulou from the European Commission, who will be joining us. I think you're the only real local participants today. We've got Diego Pavia, who's the CEO of EIT InnoEnergy, who will bring us also the private sector's perspective on this. And then we've got Leda Bologni, who's from the Emilia-Romagna region, and she will bring the regional perspective. And all this will be orchestrated and moderated by the chair of our expert group on innovation ecosystem, Professor Peter Haring Bolivar. Can I please ask you all to come and sit? We'll move this away. I'll let you do that.
Was number 5.
You don't get to take the microphone. Otherwise, it's going to be.
That's strong. So to keep the discussion lively, I think I must congratulate all the team for making this effort and for the intense discussion. I completely agree with Frederick that we have to develop some kind of measures. Just as a warm-up round, I would like to first start in your various roles. Each one of you has witnessed innovation becoming a strategic priority for universities. What surprised you about the present results of the EUA survey on the universities presently? Perhaps we just start with you, Leda.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I am not very much surprised, as we have an extensively experience in collaboration with the universities at local level. So I have found several well-known for me and for us situation. But to me, it was the most surprising item was concerns the last question that I have seen before, concerning the value of Erasmus Plus more than Horizon 2020. We at regional level have a completely different situation, but probably start from a different history and tradition that we have in the innovation policy, but I will show you this later.
Good morning. It's
Thank
okay?
you,
Yes.
Anna.
Good afternoon to everybody, and I'm very happy to be with you today. Actually, it was not a surprise, despite the fact that I would agree with you. When we speak about innovation, I'm wondering whether we speak just about pitching and collaboration between universities, or we speak about really innovation developments, results that they will be brought to the market. And actually, this is what we try to do with Horizon Europe program, even more than in the past, but also with our policy. So I would say that was a bit surprising for me. Nevertheless, there might be explanations for that. As you said, Stefan, EIC is a new full-fledged program. We need to be more, communicate about that. Already the first results demonstrates that the participants are very much focused to particular countries and areas, so probably there is a gap there we have to address. EIT, however, is something well established, and I have to say that there are a lot of instruments already put in place which support universities. So probably it's the sampling that you had behind your survey as well, maybe not well spread, I don't know, something to be analyzed. Nevertheless, I would like to say that I'm very pleased to see some of the outcomes. And I would like to highlight 2 or 3 that I believe we'll try to address. To change the research assessment, I think this is key. As long as the focus of researchers in universities is to produce publications and not focused on the results, not focused on being more entrepreneurial, it will not change the situation. So it is a difficult goal. We have put it in all policy papers that we have, call it ERA, tomorrow at the universities communication. Innovation probably will not be addressed as such, but I think it's an important element to look at. Second, skills and talents. I think it was said, this is probably where it comes, all the approach of Erasmus. We need to do more about talented people and skilled people, and I think we will try to address this in various occasions. And last but not least, the collaboration with industry and business. This is the big challenge which comes on the top, and it's not a challenge only for universities, in the sense that the business and the regional authorities and the local ecosystem should look at the universities as a key player. So it's not just that the universities, they have to reach out, but they have to be also wanted by the other partners of the ecosystem. And in this context, I value very much what you said about citizen science, science for citizens, citizen science, and citizens communication. This is an element that we have to see how we address it in a more focused way in the context of the innovation ecosystem.
Thank you very much. Perhaps your perspective, Annick.
Yes, shortly. In fact, what surprised me is the convergence of the results. The fact that I filled the survey for my university, and I did not expect to find that finally there was a convergence, and so that all universities, or the majority of the universities, have integrated innovation as being a transversal mission. covering both teaching and research, that in fact we met the same types of barriers. You just mentioned some of them. And so for me it's encouraging because it means that we have there the possible levers to make it better. So just that.
Thank you very much, Annick. Diego, perhaps the reality check. If nobody was surprised, why did we make the review?
Yeah, thank you. So first, 20 seconds of what is EUA, because that frames the answer. Is one of the first KICs, and KICs stands for Knowledge Innovation Community. So we were launched back in 2010, is a PPP, partnership, together with support of the Commission. And we were 24 shareholders back in 2010, 13 of them universities. I repeat, is a company, shareholders, strange word, 13 universities. Even one of them, KTH, had to ask for a waiver in the parliament to be able to become a shareholder of a company. That was 11 years ago. So they were absolutely strategic in their decision. We want to go towards innovation. Then, after 11 years, so this community of innovation in sustainable energy, that's ours, we have got like 500 partners, only 20 universities. So we started with 13, only 7 more. So the reality check. And what has been the output of the 2 outputs of the university, that is the talent that the universities create and the research that can become innovative products. Talent, hats off, extremely good evolution of universities, creating new syllabus to address the gap that exists in Europe. In research, applied research results becoming the base for innovative products that are commercialized, marginal. And why? Now go back to what Anna said. The incentive to the staff of the universities is not towards this. Either we change it, or people will keep on thinking about publications, and that's it. Not on the commercial world. And the commercial world cannot be the dark side of life. I remember in the early days, then we were pushing the universities towards the commercial world to make money out of research applied results. They said, hey, but that's the dirty word. That's the dark side of life. Well, that's life. If universities wants to go into innovation, that has to happen. And we have to measure. And Freddie, we have to measure outputs, even if it's a collaborative output between many players, but if we don't measure, they will be unable to progress. And then 2 reactions of the survey, if I may. Number 1 is about, why the collaboration with industry and startups is not so fruitful. It's about the clock. The clock of industry and the startups is ticking by the minute, because either they pivot or they're dead. The clock of universities clicks today, in some of them, at another rhythm. And second, about funding. Research is about supply side money. Funding, Horizon Europe, hats off. Innovation is about demand side money, so customers' money, so market money, so risk money. So are the universities willing to engage in putting resources before the money comes? Question mark, because that's innovation.
Okay, that's an interesting goal, and perhaps to set the clock and the ticking rhythm. Annick, you as a university leader, you have a first row seat in devising institutional strategies through which we should contribute to innovation. And we saw in the results this very, I found it surprising to really see that 3/4 of the universities already have an innovation strategy agenda in place. Could you perhaps elaborate for the others? What does it mean to make such a strategic decision? What does it contain? And does it address the ticking clock and output parameters?
Yeah, I'm sure it is. In fact, if I want to define what I see in the innovation strategy of a university, I would say exploring all the different ways we can value knowledge that is created inside universities and organize the transfer to the society, and society in the broad meaning of it. So not only commercial actors, but actors in general. And there, in fact, it means also that it involves possible internal innovation, because we have to change the way we do things. Concerning the clock, in fact, I think that there is a twofold innovation strategy in universities and that we have to preserve that. The first aspect is that we have to meet the expectations of society because there are huge challenges, and those are current or short-term challenges in which perhaps we can propose solutions because we have already the necessary knowledge, competencies to fit with those challenges. But I think that our role as universities is also to prepare long-term challenges. And so in the definition of this innovation, I could say exploitation of what we already have and exploration of future possibilities. Sometimes it's very tricky to give the necessary resources to those twofold aspects. And to that, we add the fact that we have also to integrate the big societal challenges and make a strategy with all that. But I think it's possible, and if I come to some examples, it was discussed in the survey, the fact that a lot of universities have supported entrepreneurship among students, and it already began some years ago, perhaps 10 or 20 years ago, and it's a good point. But more and more, I think, for the long-term aspect, we also have to make those entrepreneurial ventures be sustainable, and so to accompany students in order that they have sustainability by design in the ventures they create. And this is also to prepare the future. The same for research. We can have projects that are very applied with companies in order to solve problems, but we also have to preserve time, space, money in order to have exploratory projects for which we don't know what will be the possible impact, but are necessary, and we all know that in order to prepare the future challenges. So I would say, to answer your question, that designing an innovation strategy into a university is very complex. You have a lot of dimensions, and that I would mention especially the fact that we have to preserve the role of universities that is specific and that is necessary among ecosystems, and finally to combine the expectations of society with the nature of universities themselves.
Okay, a multi-dimensional answer. Out of this multi-dimensional answer and hearing the precise requirements by Diego, Anna, perhaps how does the Commission see these multiple perspectives of universities, how to enhance them and how to balance the short term and the long term? Is there a more unique vision in how to boost the capacity of universities in the future in this multidimensional area?
Well, I mean, the reply is it's very difficult and it's not unique. I think we work all together in this and we'll try all together to deliver something more substantial. So, as Commissioner Gabriel said, we've put a lot of policies already in place. European research area, okay, we speak about principles, values, principles, how research should be implemented, how we bring research closer to the market, how the universities could play a role in this. And indeed, one part of the role of universities and the work of universities that we have to pursue is how we can empower universities to address the new challenges and to be really a strong partner in the innovation ecosystem. I think it's very clear. We set the scene in European research area and we set the scene in the European educational area, but that's not enough because there are actions, but how we put the actions. And then we come with a new strategy that we are preparing on universities, and we work very much with all stakeholders and also with you on how to concretize in practice what we expect from the universities to do and how we can facilitate the universities in this path. And you name a lot of what could be done, and innovation strategy is very challenging, but it's very important. So I was thinking about indeed we can facilitate, because in the Commission we can facilitate. You have your independence, we cannot impose to you things, but we can facilitate things through guiding principles and actions that we can envisage to do at European level and to attract the interest of institutions, but also the member states, because although in your survey you said the regulatory framework is not a priority, I believe that it could be a facilitator towards innovations. So what we expect from the universities, what the universities could do in this context. First, you spoke about digital, close to society, sharing information, data, and knowledge. And I'm saying that because if you want to be an enabler on an innovation ecosystem, I think the universities could demonstrate that the knowledge that they produce makes a difference and brings an impact. And we, from the Commission side, we have put in place a lot of initiatives. I'm talking in particular for European Open Science Cloud, about how we can share the results of our research and interconnect the results of our research between the universities. I think it's an important thing for the digital transition of the university per se, and we are ready to support on that. Second, what you can look at the innovation strategy is what are the possibilities that are provided in the context of synergies. And synergies that we have in the different programs, but synergies that we have also between the different actors. And I think through the communication of university, but also through the new communication on innovation ecosystem, we will look in particular how we can reinforce these synergies. And the third point that I would like to highlight, and I said it already, is about the talents and the skills. And one of the priorities we want to push through all the policy documents that we have is really not only how to skill the talents that they remain in Europe, but how to attract the talents that they left Europe and how to attract talents that they will probably were never in Europe, but it would make sense to bring them in Europe. So what I want to say, there is a policy from our side, but you are independent. You spoke about the institutional independence of the universities. So it's really up to you how to put in place this policy in your university strategies. And I think all these are important aspects for promoting innovation. Last but not least, focus. The twin transitions. So how you strategically focus your activities, not just because you won the next Horizon Europe program, but because you bid for those activities in the Horizon Europe program that will contribute to the challenges of the society.
Thank you very much. And so we see a highly supportive, enabling vision by the Commission. Leda, sorry, how do you see the way to make the synergies work between the European area? You're an expert both at the national and the regional level, and can we get at least a homogeneous, coherent environment as universities to then commit, as Diego said, yeah, we have to commit to one goal, yeah. But if we have three different layers of regulation which push on different directions, how do you see there the vision for a coherent environment at the different multi-levels?
Well, our experience is that the coherence could be achieved, but what is needed is to share strategy from the very, very beginning. So the coherence between the different layers, but also within the different actors in the European, in the innovation ecosystem, is strategic, but not so easy to achieve when you face the multi-level, not only from regional, national, and European, but also at the regional level between the different actors of the innovation ecosystem. In fact, what probably we have not discussed enough this morning is that innovation ecosystem is made by some different actors, but the value is not is more than the sum of each actor, and the problem is to reach this value and to favor and to coordinate the emergence of this value. So the value of the integration and not of the sum of each specific action. So in our perspective, this can be done, but well, if I have to discuss in our last 20 years experience, we have to start from the very, very beginning, including all the actors. And for sure, the university were spare partners from the very beginning, but also companies and also public administrations, not only as funders, but also as users. As an example, speaking about health, hospitals, and life sciences, and so on. So this is very important. And another point that I want to discuss is the importance of the environment. As you said before during the discussion in the previous section, it is very important to create conditions that are coherent with the situation in which you are embedded. So there is not a measure that fits for all. And so it is very important to carry out actions that are coherent with your situation. As an example, in our experience, we have a very important entrepreneurial activity. We are close 4 million inhabitants, and there is one company each 10 inhabitants, including babies and retired. So it's a very, very large number of companies, but they are micro or small companies. So if you speak about innovation with the small companies or micro companies, it's completely different if you speak about innovation with large companies. As an example, discussing from this last point, we have a weakness in our region that stands in the limited number of jobs in R&D in our companies. As you can imagine, in small company, it is very hard to have specific skills for research and development. And in this sense, we have, let me say, we are, as regional administration, have forced the insertion of new jobs in R&D in companies. And how we have done this, requiring as mandatory condition to have new jobs in a company that want to receive regional money for a research and development project. So this is one example. And from another point of view, we have, using the same, let me say, tool, obliged, between commas, obliged the universities and the companies to collaborate if they wanted to receive regional money. And, well, the history is quite a long history, but I have some data concerning the number of contracts, as an example, signed in 10 years, and at the end of the day, half of them were without public funds. So this is a very important achievement, because it means that, of course, you have to start a mechanism, but if you are able to continue in this mechanism, at the end of the day, there is the trust between companies, between, let me say, producers and users of knowledge. There is a trust. So you don't need to have public money, but you want to use your pocket money because you recognize the value of the results.
It's a very remarkable strategy, which I tend to like a lot, but which would make a lot of university actors quite nervous. Yeah. But it's at the end of the day, after 10 years, they will understand the advantage. Yeah. But I think that's also about finding the common values and the mission statement of a region. Yeah. And perhaps to you, Diego, you in the results we just said that the universities in our questionnaire framed the number of partnerships of the most important measure of innovation activity. How do you see that coming from EIT InnoEnergy, where really with deep respect, it's one institution which has moved 3 unicorns. Yeah? So that's more than 3 companies which in less than 5 years have 1 billion of turnover. Yeah, and so and that's reality. Yeah, that's real, tangible, feelable, measurable innovation. Are we measuring the wrong things, or where should our values be?
Thank you for the PR. A unicorn is 1 billion market cap, not 1 billion revenue. That's a small nuance. But before I answer to the metrics, if I can pivot on what Anna and Leda said, Anna talked about the talent and whether we as ecosystem, we can capture the talent wherever it comes from. Our experience after 11 years is that we have in our master program levels that we have done together with universities, we have the intakes altogether, it's 4,000 from all over the world. 60% coming from non-European countries. 99% have remained in Europe after they have finished the master degree. And that's talent that remains in Europe because we have an ecosystem that is, for them, a way to grow their dreams. So that's a fact after 11 years. Then pivoting on what Leda said about, what is an innovation ecosystem? It's very important that is a zoo of innovators, of innovation, of financial institutions, of customers, of public administration, of regulators. So it's a zoo. So universities needs to be ready to be working in a zoo of different guys with different objectives. Last Wednesday and Thursday, we were in Berlin. Our flagship event, yearly flagship event is called the TBB. 1,000 physical meeting of all those different constituencies. And all were there not for their own objective, is for creating innovations that could be produced that could have an economic impact. So to the question of Frederick and to the metrics, and I'll go to your metrics. Yeah, means metrics, so how many partnerships, how many IPs, we don't care. We never measure. We never, as KIC InnoEnergy, invest in any of those metrics. Our metrics is the economical impact that this innovation will create. Because it is about jobs, and is what we need as Europeans. So we don't enter into that's big research or applied research, whatever it is. It's about the end game. If everybody understands how they contribute to the end game, and that's what we measure, everybody aligns to this end game. So let's look at KPIs that are output-driven, not input or process. Yeah.
One spontaneous question. Today in the morning we had a meeting with the expert group, and we saw with sadness, really this missing or the suboptimal cooperation between academia and industry. It's not that we still have a predominantly cooperation between industry or between academia, and then also on that. What would you find about such an idea of an Erasmus transfer program between academia and industry, like exchange? Yeah, to control the zoo, you have to create trust between the partners and the talents. Yeah, do we need there some trans-institutional, trans-sectoral mechanism?
Totally, and thank you for using the word trust, because when you're working in this zoo, you need trust among the partners. So you all contribute to the same. But on the Erasmus transfer, blah, blah, today the master programs we have created in the early days, 2011, there was 90% sourced by academic syllabus. Today, our master programs is maybe 20% the traditional academic syllabus, then 30% from industry, then 20% from financial institutions that are also teachers to the programs. Then comes the regulator and teaches about because regulation will create or keep programs. So also the means for the product, that is the graduate, is already shared among the zoo members. And then the trust is built from design. It's not that higher education will create something that then I will vet in my industry. It's we co-create what will really make the change that is people, not technology.
Yeah, co-creation, public partnership, joint labs, these kind of activities. Anna, what's your vision to controlling the zoo via a more intense exchange between academia and industry?
It's not about controlling, but it's more when we develop the European area, European research area. One of the main initiatives that we have discussed, it was, can we do something in the context of research and innovation, I'm talking like this, that it will stay in the people's mind like Erasmus. I mean, the idea was that. And then we came with this idea of ERA4U, which is a very concrete initiative which has two aspects. The first aspect is very much focused on funding and in the area of the low-performing countries, can we promote through a brain circulation scheme this exactly intersectorial mobility with a loop? It's not just you go from the university to the industry and basta, so you turn back. So that will enable the young researchers to have experience and to go closer to the business and to see what it means, not just to do your research, but to contribute to the business you research. So this scheme will come out, and we hope that it will be very powerful. But in addition, we have seen this era for you from a very political perspective as well. Can we monitor the careers of researchers, and can we see what is the pattern, whether there is a change, and whether we can see this shift out of the academic career to the industrial, or whether indeed we can promote this turnaround, the different activities. So for us, it's extremely important, whether it will be a new full-fledged scheme under Erasmus or not. That's something that, of course, it could be discussed, but we are going in this direction. And I think that it should be seen from financial level, but also political level, and monitoring.
Okay, Leda and then Annick.
Yes, thank you. I want to add one example of zoo that we have realized in Emilia-Romagna. 4 years ago, started this experiment that can be of inspiration of you all. As probably you know, Emilia-Romagna is the location of the most important sport cars in the world. No? You know very well, Ferrari, Lamborghini, Maserati, and so on. The problem for that companies is to find the right skills for personnel. Then the experiment was this: put together the 4 universities that are located in our region, 9 companies that are, let me say, concurrent in this field. So all the sport cars that are located in our region, and they worked together to establish 7 new car engineers, carriers, in international masters. And now we are in the 4th edition of this master. So this is an example in which teachers, so university professors and industrial managers belonging to different companies work together in order to share share their knowledge in favor of skilled people. So this is a win-win situation that is quite interesting, and we have done it. So they have done it with our funds. Which is good. Yes, it is a win-win.
I will rebound on the zoo aspect, because one of my researchers is doing a research concerning university-industry collaborations, and so he worked with cards representing animals, and he asked researchers and representatives from companies how they identified the other party. And so, not surprising, universities were seen by representatives of companies as being elephants or snails, and companies were seen by researchers as being predators, eagles, or even snakes. And so there, in fact, what we see is that there is a misunderstanding of each other and a problem of trust, as you mentioned. So I think that a first aspect certainly would be to know better each other and to recognize and respect the role of each other. And so to create scenes, places where those meetings, those mutual understanding creates. Because in fact, if you look at innovation theory, it's clear that innovation teams that work, that perform the best are the ones that are heterogeneous. But you have at least to have a common aspect, that people share something in common. And for the moment, there is too few aspects that we share between universities and companies. And to rebound also on what you said, Anna, I'm really interested by what you said, because I have myself a bizarre career as an academic, because I was first, I made my PhD, then I went in the private sector, then I came back. And I think that in my university, we are only 3 among the 250 academics to have such an alternate career, I would say. But for us, it was very difficult to be recognized. And so there is a work also inside universities to recognize diversity in the different careers and to value the fact that someone coming from the private sector is also a key element, because this person will also help to create the trust between the different types of institutions. So I would be really pleased to see an evolution in this direction.
Okay, Diego.
Yeah, just to rebound, sorry. So two things. The zoo. I'm an engineer, so in energy, you believe that engineering will make everything. But the famous NIMBY, not in my backyard, and the society and citizen adoption, we are bringing anthropologists in our investments. Why? Because at the end, it's about us using whatever goodies we're going to... and in the early days, engineers, hey, that's not a hard science. That's, well, without this, it will not be adopted. So there's not economic value. So let's be open-minded into the US. And the second rebound is, because it's all about creating economic value. Our master programs, the students pay for the party. They pay 36,000 euros for coming to our programs. And they do because it's value. Otherwise, they wouldn't.
Congrats. May I say something? I mean, I had the chance to go to Harvard for a week to do a leadership program for innovation. And actually, this is what I learned there, that if you want to bring innovation, you need to have very diverse teams with sociologists, anthropologists, together with the engineers, and all the opinions have to be valued. So I'm just wondering that how many innovation degrees we have in Europe? Just question. So just a degree to learn students or PhDs or in a master degree about learn how to do innovation. I don't know. I'm not a specialist in education. I'm not a specialist in education, but
Anna, you have a big responsibility there, because since you are sitting in DGRT, innovation, blah, blah, today the tools that we give ourselves as Europeans for research are extremely good, but the tools that we give ourselves for innovation, they are not good. So there, and you are holding the pen, so there you have...
Okay. Everyone who proposes something gets homework. Annick, you reply perhaps to the number of degrees in innovation.
I cannot give the number, but in fact, I think that all faculties of social sciences management will have such a degree. The problem is not there. The problem is to integrate creativity and innovation skills into other faculties. And especially, for instance, I will have no problem with my computer scientists. They will be more than happy to follow that. Perhaps even in science, but it depends which science. The problem will be, for instance, with people from literature. Why do you ask me to look at innovation? They don't understand. So we have also a variety of types of academics. And so for some, it's really normal. I have students in my course of innovation and entrepreneurship. They come from computer science and they are really happy to be there. But I will never see, for instance, a physicist or a geologist. And it's a pity, because they, of course, also have the possibility to create interesting, innovative things. So there is a culture to change, and we must begin with the faculty members. Because if professors are not convinced, there the students will not be also.
Amen. Okay. Leda?
Another example of Zoe concerning the soft skills about innovation to be inserted in the careers of students. So two examples, not only one. The first one is recently we have launched at regional level one important strategic program concerning big data and supercomputing and so on. So the problem for this is to include in this flavor not the STEM, but the rest of the world. And we started with an experiment organizing modular courses concerning data science at different levels, addressed to graduates of all the disciplines, starting from law to medicine to literature to all the disciplines. And we touched more than 1,000 degrees in the different location of our region. This is the first one. The second one is experiment that we have done for doctorates. Because also from the high scale level, the problem of innovation exists. Also at this level. And as an example, the combination of creativity with the technical and technological aspects, or the so-called leadership activity. And in this sense, we have organized the courses in the framework of the doctorate careers in order to put these elements in the teaching programs. And we also, in this case, we have touched a lot of PhD students. So this is only, they are small steps. To reach the goal, but the goal is very, very important, and we need to go step by step, even if we have not enough time, but step by step is very important for us, especially in the small companies. And going back to the Erasmus Plus discussion, as an example, for small companies it's very hard to use such an instrument, such a tool. And probably we have to speak with different tools.
Okay, we unfortunately have a limited time budget, but I love to discuss with you. I want to make the discussion on ETSU a bit more complicated. Yeah, we see that we have all embraced the vision to try to do innovation. We have gaps between industry and academia. We have different velocities at different disciplines, at different actors, at different industrial sizes. Now comes the new vision, a pan-European vision for innovation. Are we capable to cope with the next step, although we have a lot of homework on the local implementation of innovation strategies? Perhaps the more or less your impression on what's your vision about pan-European innovation platform in the future? Is it open to all, or will only certain regions be capable to cope with the additional challenge? Yeah? Or what's our expectation there? Perhaps your individual opinion to all of these. Yeah. Yeah. Could Anna, yes, perhaps? Yeah.
Because we are preparing now this political position, and it's not easy, I have to say. We have been, as Commissioner Gabriel said, contacted many stakeholders. We have discussed with regional authorities, with unicorns, with innovation ecosystem leaders, etc. Now, it's not easy, but certainly it should not be something that is favorable only for part of Europe or part of regions. So for sure, one of the main elements to address through this work, it will be to promote innovation cohesion, or I put it the other way around, to reduce innovation divide. So in other words, whatever will be at the end this pan-European innovation ecosystem should be very much interconnected and based on innovation that comes from local and regional level. And I don't think will be one fits all for all regions, because each region has its own potential and capacity. We, of course, with our policies, we want to adhere the innovation potential and excellence across Europe in all regions, but we cannot wait for this moment. So we have already to base on what already exists, and what is important is to interconnect the innovation ecosystems. The second thing that I would like to say is, I don't want to repeat talents, but you all understand that talent is going to be one of the most important aspects also in this context, because we want to attract talents and to share talents between the different innovation ecosystems and to mobilize and to ensure the mobility. The other thing that I would like to highlight that will be the green and digital transitions. You raised that. And why I'm saying this, at the end, all the money, the European money currently, a lot of money, they are spent on digital and green, for obvious reasons. We have the Resilience and Recovery Plan, we have cohesion funds, we have Horizon Europe funds. So what we could do to strategically focus at regional, European and national level on these priorities, and how the universities and the actors of innovation ecosystem will also deliver. You know that because you have been working on energy for many years. But what I want to say is that this focus, it's probably, or we believe, it is the reply to the problem of Europe. How we could lead on technological developments. And the focus in areas where we are not already bypassed by others, or we are at the level of competing, I think it will be extremely important. And finally, what I would like to say is we, as Commission, we cannot impose things through a communication, but we can direct, and we can create the framework. Whether this framework, it will be taken up by the member states, I think it's very important, and the regional authorities, so we can act as an inspiration. We can create this framework in collaboration with the member states. We have the EIC Forum, as Commissioner Gabriel said. What we should not forget is what it was also said, that it's not just about the high TRL. Innovation starts from basic research, it has its circle, and through basic research, sometimes, by coincidence, as side effects, we have innovations. So we have to think about the entire cycle. And last but not least, if we manage to accompany this with funding or new instruments of funding that address innovation and address the problem of scaling up in Europe, that will be even better. So we try our best. We need you. And we need to convince also the innovation ecosystems. You are very much convinced, I think, at the regional and national level, that universities play a role, because universities, they bring the talent, the out-of-the-box thinking, the knowledge, and they have to be, as you said, open to society. So the universities without walls in the middle of a city, this is how I see universities in the future.
I'm very happy to hear this multidimensionality, because the more geographically diverse the cooperation is, the narrower the topic has to be. Yeah? And so we will probably need several interconnections between regions in different areas. Yeah? Leda, what's your vision for pan-European cooperation? Is it automatically that it has to be with another car manufacturing region? Because I think this narrowing down might be dangerous. No?
In this process, there is nothing automatic. Nothing at all. On the contrary, we need inspiration, we need reflection, we need ideas, and we need practical solutions. To me, the large availability of resources that come from the recovery plan could be a very important opportunity, but only if we will together work on the right use of such money, because there is an important risk to use such money useless. That is an important risk, and I think that we have to work all together in this direction, because not always money is the solution. Of course, money can favor the solution, but what is important are ideas, are opportunities, are scale of the investment. One problem for us, for example, is the scale of investment and the scale of experiments and the scale of actions, as there is nothing that fit for all. Also, investments and measure for investments. the pan-European ecosystem will be a very important challenge. And I think that we have to have in mind that we have to manage in such way this mechanism. Because if we leave the mechanism going alone, we will have no results. And in this sense, it's very important, for example, to have the so-called platforms or situations in which we can share methods, tools. We can work in an integral way, not so avoiding silos. Because with silos, innovation doesn't work, doesn't exist. Yeah. So this is the major challenge to me, not an easy one.
I completely agree. Diego, you being someone who has been active on a pan-European scale for more than a decade and making it fruitful, what's your expectation for this pan-European innovation?
I've got mixed feelings. As Anna was saying, it's not an easy animal to eat. So two messages to pivot on what Leda said. You said, hey, should Emilia-Romagna with the automakers partner with the German automakers? My answer is a big yes. A big yes. And that the universities also, they should look at where the industrial world is going to align. I mean, Fiat together with Peugeot, they do Stellantis. Fiat, Stellantis with Mercedes, they do the battery ACC. So if those off-takers of research or whatever, they're already partnering, and with Chrysler in the States, you better align on innovation terms. Not on basic research, but in innovation terms. So for me, I would not use the word region that much. I would use the word specialization. And if the second attribute is region, perfect. So now the paper that we know from the European Innovation Area, if you count the hits of innovation, is like 118 times. And the second word with more hits in the document, the H-page document that at least I know, is region. For me, that makes is a noise. I would love to use a specialized region or something, but region itself, the geographical dimension doesn't play, at least from this side of the table. From the policy side, it should play, but from this side of the table, it does not play. It doesn't rhyme. It doesn't rhyme with what is happening out there. Yeah, it's about specialization, not about geography, where the whole thing sits.
It's a critical balance. Annick, your comment to this?
A short comment. I totally agree that for some fields it's important to be able to go further and so to join all the forces around some specializations. But I think also that there is a value in the hybridization of different fields, for instance. I'm give an example. We work at the level of our ecosystem on the value of cultural and creative industries in the way they manage firms and the way they grow, etc., in order to teach other firms in totally different sectors good practices. And I think that there is also something to do there, joining ecosystems with different types of specializations in order to see what they can learn from each other. So perhaps two levels of collaboration, specialization in one hand, and in the other, collaboration in a learning loop.
If I may say something, if I allow the time, the time allows, another concept that we still developing, and I think it will play a very important role in this context, is the European Research Area hubs. So you ring the bell with this, because actually what we want to do is to bring ecosystem together in a way that they will be able to learn from each other, to create the platform, to create the network, to exchange knowledge, but also this will help ecosystem to upgrade themselves. So we are developing the concept. Is still, I mean, there are different opinions, and you can push this concept in a different direction. But certainly, the added value will be to bring and to share knowledge between different ecosystems. And specialization is good, but we should not forget that disruptive innovation not always comes from specialization.
I think it's always about balances, yeah? And the field of opportunities is becoming more and more complex. And my time budget is being close to finished before I get killed by some... perhaps the opportunity for 1 or 2 questions from the audience? Toril.
Should I have a microphone, or is it thank you for a very, very interesting discussion. And I think one of the issues here is making a bridge between university, talent, research education, and industry, public sector in order to make impact and innovation. And our university is actually part of 5 KICs. So we really encourage and find these kinds of mechanisms quite useful. But to you, Anna, I think how can we facilitate and even make more collaboration with various kinds of mechanisms from the council to facilitate even more collaboration between industry and academia, and also for making more out of all the research that's actually performed within academia. Thank you.
Well, the Commission will not give the solutions. That's very clear. We can facilitate, we can develop policies. There are plenty of policies that we are developing currently, and we can develop instruments. I think EIT and KICS is a very good instrument, and we, through the Horizon Europe program, even the conditionalities of the Horizon Europe program, we very much focus on exploit the results. Exploitation of the results means also bringing the results of the research to the business, to the industry. Now, what could be done more? And what we'll try to do in the upcoming communication of universities, because I think it is the most relevant in this context. First of all, we will try to work very closely, with our colleagues from DG AC, so that we look at the entire missions of universities. Not just, not to have silos, because silos could exist also in the Commission, in universities, so we have to bring things together. Second, I believe that the work that was done in the context of the European university alliances already reinforced a lot the collaboration between the universities, but with the objective to empower universities as well. It's not just about collaboration to do research. It's not about collaboration to do research. It's not collaboration just to do studies. So it is a collaboration to empower the universities in their future role. And there, we have to see whether out of the experience and the lessons learned from the university alliances, we can develop something more challenging and more powerful. I cannot give you now what. There are ideas around the table, but certainly something more stable already around collaboration of universities. And then, if this will be established and will address all the issues of talents, funding, etc., then I think that there will be a more, let's say, powerful way that the universities could represent themselves in the context of the ecosystem towards the industry. So in other words, if something is more stable, sustainable, and powerful, could maybe better communicate or advocate about the role of universities in the context of this innovation ecosystem. The third thing, I believe, we did a lot in the research environment through the partnerships, joint undertakings, public-private partnerships, in order to bring these two words together. And this is already there, but possibly is not yet done in the context of the missions and the strategies of the universities per se. So what we expect is whether we put in the new communication measures that first could facilitate more spin-offs as entrepreneurship in the universities, and second, come with ideas that will promote this collaboration with the industry with incentives. And now the incentives that goes in two ways. Is for the universities, and I personally believe that it's not just about funding, it's about finding the interest to do something different than the standard work. But second, also to the industry, why the industry has to collaborate with universities. And I believe from what you said also, this is the big question mark, what the industry will get from the universities, why they don't do it so far. Is it just the time cycle that you said, or is it something more than that? And that goes a little bit, I believe, to the issue that you have raised about IP. So if in collaboration between industry and universities, what will be the IP regime to look at? Let's think about Horizon Europe program. We don't, all the IPs are belong to the beneficiaries in a kind of a consortium. Is this a sustainable way to work with the industry? I don't know. I'm just thinking that probably we have to be even more intuitive and more powerful in a new IP policy, which on one side will bring the two parties together. And last but not least, industry is collaborating if they want to make profit. They want to make profit. They are not collaborating for any other reason. Maybe there should be a convincing narrative to the industry that by collaborating with universities, they will make profit at global level.
Okay, thank you very much. And so a lot of homework for us to control the zoo, but we're thankful for the opportunity and the respect towards freedom to act. Yeah? And I think we have to be very careful at what you said. Yeah? We have to have perhaps the right observation instruments to see if what we're doing is really productive and really brings at the end a measurable impact on innovation. Yeah, and so I thank all of you for the very lively discussion and for giving us inspiration for the future. I thank very much the EUA office for organizing this, the first live event for me also in 1.5 years. I really enjoyed talking to you. Yeah, and I would like then to close the session, and I would like to give then the final words to Michael Murphy, the president of EUA.
I'm designated as the closing act, but I did reflect on the conversation and on the need for a specific output. The microphone. Sorry. The closing act has to be heard. I did reflect during that conversation, which was fascinating, about the need for an output, specific output from the event. And I've again heard, as I've heard many times before, the challenge of different cultures in universities, in business, and other public sector organizations. So here's a thought. We need a European micro-credential, not a degree, a micro-credential, bridging the gap, culture and language, between business, universities, and other civic entities. It should be designed by Leda and Diego. The Maserati experience will have influence in the market. It should be funded by Anna, and it should be quality assured by Annick, and named after Peter Bolivar. I'm not kidding. I've always felt we should have masters in body language, and we should have certificates in the management of prima donnas. May sound daft, but you might consider what I've suggested as a specific outcome. Anyway, my actual scripted role is to say thanks, obviously to the Commissioner, and Anna will convey that on our behalves, and wishing her success with the innovation agenda. And to the panelists for a fascinating hour, and thank you for travelling under difficult circumstances and for filling all those locator forms for different countries. Thank you, Peter, and to the expert group. And would you please convey our thanks to the others? The message I will not have to repeat. We have a central role in the university sector. The key theme must be openness, as we've set out in the vision. But the most important message is to say we are open to play our part and to learn from all our partners how we can do better in the knowledge that they will reciprocate that openness to learning. And our innovations ecosystems expert group will remain committed to driving the agenda for us. So thank you for joining the first physical event for EUA, the first physical event for Scotland House, and the first physical event for most of you. Thank you, and goodbye wherever you are. Thank you very much.